Greg Swenson, who is in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention, and US political analyst and Democrat supporter Nomiki Konst joins us. Greg, I'll turn to you first. Is this a symptom of the state of political discourse in US?
Well, Steve, it's a great question. I think so, but I can't say it with 100% confidence because we just don't know enough about the gunman who attempted to assassinate President Trump. So, but I'd have to say it feels that way. It feels that the rhetoric has gotten elevated to a point where it could get dangerous. Using language like, we have to put a bullseye on Trump. That came from Biden. We must stop Trump. Trump's a dictator, or he's he looks like Hitler, or he acts like Hitler. These things are probably not a good idea in an environment that's already elevated.
It's the problem that it seems to work. It's too successful politically to have the angry argument rather than the facts-based or the policy-based one.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely merit to that, Steve. And I think, I'd like to focus on policies and decisions and outcomes rather than, personal hatred. And there's surely plenty of that, and perhaps on both sides. I wouldn't argue that, there isn't some of that on the right. But I think that, this election has been the election of personalities or, personal anger, as opposed to talking about, again, issues and outcomes. The American people prior to yesterday cared about the open border and inflation and bad foreign policy decisions. They don't really care, for comparisons to dictators. So I think that I would hope that this will bring the temperature down, maybe get away from some of the hateful rhetoric and start focusing on policies. And if you disagree with your opponent, that's fine. I'm sure people disagree with Trump on his policies, but I'd rather stick to that.
Yeah. Nomiki, even if, I'm just slightly caveating the question, presuming you might bring this up, even if the Republicans have done some of this, do not Democrats have to address the tone that they've used? If you want to be the adults in the room, surely you shouldn't demonize someone, because if you demonize someone, look what can happen.
I mean, Donald Trump is the manifestation, the icon, the prototype of the worst form of rhetoric our politics has produced. So to disconnect this from Trump's rhetoric and make it about both sides is not really fair. I mean, Donald Trump literally said, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. The Republican Party platform and Project 2025 are incredibly violent. It's a violent platform. But when you put all this mixed in with modern politics that is very much driven by right-wing leaning algorithms, extremist-driven algorithms, you have a problem. I mean, when Gabby Giffords, former congresswoman, was shot, 13 years ago, that was as the internet was blowing up, and extremism was rising online. There's a lot of data now that correlates the rise of extremism and misinformation and conspiracy theories with how these tech companies have been able to facilitate these incredibly unequal algorithms that are based off of hate, takedowns, attacks on women, attacks on people of color, so much so that Google even fired the person who was there to investigate it once she reported that Google's algorithm was sexist and it was racist. So we have a problem in this country that has always existed, right? There's always extremism, but now politics is being funded by online extremism, meaning the more outrageous you are, the more likely you're going to raise money. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look at Lauren Boebert. Look at Donald Trump. Every time there is an online fight or a public fight, they're raising money, the tweets are growing, and the conspiracy theories are going up. So yes, it's a little bit of human nature, but it's amplified by this tech system that we're just not taking on. So much so that there are prime ministers across the country who've stepped down. The former leader of Japan was assassinated by an online extremist. This is an online extreme issue.
OK, let me bring Greg back in, and you two can discuss this between yourselves, because to address that point of, effectively, Donald Trump is the icon of the thing we're talking about, the rhetoric that causes problems.
No, I mean, I think a lot of Donald Trump's rhetoric is impolite and unfiltered, but I don't think it's terribly hateful. And calling someone, again, he doesn't call Biden a dictator and tell people that Biden has to have a bullseye on him. So, but I don't disagree with some of this online the activity that might foster some of this. And I think we saw that with Steve Scalise when he was with the attempted assassination of Steve Scalise when he was shot during a Republican baseball game back in 2017 by a Bernie Sanders supporter. I don't know where both right and left gets this stuff, but it is troubling, and I think it's something that that should be discussed for sure.
Nomiki?
Listen, you're going to have extremists everywhere. There have been since the beginning of time. I mean, we've had several assassination attempts and assassinations in our country's history. It's just amplified now. And when the ecosystem, the political ecosystem, is built off of outrage and anger, every single time there's a debate, every day I open my emails and it's Republicans and Democrats saying, "Did you hear what so-and-so said? Give $50 now so we can take them on."
Don't you have the responsibility to lower that temperature yourself then, or at least your side to lower it? I mean, both sides at the moment, from what we see over here, are making this an election about the end of democracy. That's not lowering the temperature at all.
Democracy, and I think that's a very serious thing to keep in mind. Women's rights have been completely reversed in the last 45 years. I mean, Project 2025 literally wants to imprison women. I mean, this is outrageous. We are reversing ourselves, and we're becoming a plutocracy. I mean, this is not about when we say we're at the end of democracy. I'm in Europe right now. I was at a political conference last week with world leaders of all different backgrounds who are extremely concerned about the state of democracy and stability in the United States and the implication across the world. Yes, it is about democracy. You had Brexit. You know what the ramifications were. When the right wing, the far right, is being funded by foreign interests that are against with respect to my colleague here, who I do think is fair-minded, you have a problem in your party. There are people who are cozying up to dictators around the world. Donald Trump wanted to rip apart every single bureaucratic entity in our country. He couldn't staff the State Department. He put austerity on every different, he wanted to eliminate public schools. Okay. This is the end of democracy. Yes, it is about democracy.
Well, thank you very much to both of you, Greg Swenson and Nomiki Konst. Thank you for that. We'll talk more